ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking college football and we're breaking big news, conference realignment, UCLA, USC leaving the Pac-12, been there since the 1920s and are now 100 years later leaving them to the Big 10. The man who will never leave me, my co-host Fresh. Fresh, how you doing, buddy?
I mean, we thought conference realignment was crazy with Oklahoma, Texas, but that just sort of spurned the Big Ten to take the next step and going out there and getting USC and UCLA. That's astronomical. And really, I mean, they already had the West Coast. They already have a bunch of alumni out there and everything, but now they have the TV markets, and it's big time news.
So, Fresh, I'll just give you this here. Are you surprised? Are you surprised by this move?
They were eventually going to go somewhere else. Either the Pac-12 was going to find a way to strengthen themselves, or the Big Ten needed to bring somebody else in. It was going to be a Notre Dame or some other move because they already have Nebraska. I don't think we should be surprised. I think the timing was it was randomly out of nowhere. It's June 30th. I mean, you're like, oh, boom. There's no rumors even before it until halfway through the day. It's a strong move, and they told, hey, you guys want Texas and Oklahoma? We're taking California, and we're going to basically kill the Pac-12 off immediately.
Yeah, and when I looked at it, and the first thing I saw whenever I heard UCLA and USC, I go, oh, they want the Los Angeles TV market. In the day of NIL and Big 10 TV deal expires here in 2023, and you're looking at that, what do you have to offer now? So that was the first thing I jumped on. I looked at, I go, what media markets does the Big 10 have now? So when the Big 10 expanded to 14 teams, added Rutgers and Nebraska, everyone's like, why in the world would you add Rutgers? At the time, Rutgers had that they still do. They have the AAU accreditation that the Big 10 likes, but they mainly got the New York TV market in there, and that was huge to pick up the New York market. New York market's number one in the world. So now you have the New York market number one. You're picking up the Los Angeles market, which is number two. You talk about Northwestern, Illinois, both being able to pick up the Chicago market there. Then you talk about the number four market is Philadelphia. You have Penn State that's able to pull in that one. You then go down here to the Washington, D.C. market. That's the ninth biggest market in the country. You're picking up, Maryland will pick up that one. You go down to a little bit further. The 11th biggest market is Detroit. The Michigan teams pull that one in. Minneapolis at 15. Cleveland, Akron area. That's number 17. You go down a little bit further and you start talking about places like St. Louis, Pittsburgh, but then like the 25th and 26th market is Indianapolis and Baltimore. So in the days of NIL, you go to these bigger TV markets, there's going to be more opportunities for sponsorships. There's going to be more opportunities for endorsements. Those NIL numbers are going to increase. I don't care if I'm a professional. Let's say I'm in Philadelphia and I'm an Eagles fan, but Penn State is the number one team in the country, and they have a superstar running back. Guess what? If I'm a car dealership, I might offer that person a sponsorship there. I could care less about Penn State, but I know that guy's going to help me sell some cars. There's going to be more opportunities like that the bigger you have TV markets, and that's one major advantage that the Big 10 just picked up across the country.
Yeah, and now you're getting California, two brand teams like USC and UCLA. You know who they are. We all know the whole move is really for football oriented. Basketball is a side thing, and baseball is there. I mean, I don't think they're really going to care about USC having to go play Michigan in the middle of February or March up there in Ann Arbor. That's probably not the biggest concern. The real concern is football money in the fall. Look, we're talking football, and it's June. If it's basketball or baseball, if it's outside of March Madness or the College World Series, no one's talking. Football drives it all. You have all of California, you have the West Coast. You basically made the move to put the ball in the court now of the ACC or the Big 12 to be who was going to make that next move to bring in another team. Because right now, the pickings are getting pretty slim. Are you stopping at 16? Are you stopping at 14? Are you going to 20? Where's that next expansion going to be, and who else is going to follow along? Who doesn't want to get left out in the dark? This is also the panic point of, if you're a school, do you take the first option that you got and join, or do you wait for something different? The whole geographic landscape of who you are, the Big 12 really has nothing left. The Big 10, that was really never geographically in the name. The only one in the Southeastern Conference, they've already built their border. They're done down there. They're set. So now, Big Ten, you can make it whatever you want. You go out and grab California. You already have the alumni base. You already have fans out in California anyway. You already have Arizona, tons of alumni there and fans down that are retired to that part of the country. So you're not even worrying about this. You're going to get the viewers from those as well. You've expanded your market. You've expanded the brand. And you've also kind of built your own power league without even trying. Now, the funny part is that the whole alliance that the Pac-12, the Big 10, and the ACC had, that just didn't even make it a year. That's already gone because ACCs get kind of left out because they made a power move and the Pac-12 is done. And then part of this, what other schools from the Pac-12 leave? We saw rumors today. Oregon and Washington are the two next on the list. Are trying to go to the Big Ten. The Big Ten is just going to grab whoever they can. Going back to your point you brought up, get as many media markets, get as many schools or power names as you possibly can. Forget regional rivalries, forget traditional rivals. It's about building the power league and survival.
So hypothetically, Fresh, let's talk about what this is going to look like in the Big Ten here. Off the top of my head, you slide. Let's say the Big Ten sticks with divisions. So let's say that they don't go the route. I think what the Pac-12 said that we're not having divisions, and then that's gone now. But let's say the Big Ten keeps divisions. We don't know if they're going to keep them or not, but right now they have them. So if the Big Ten has a division, what do? Do you just slide USC over to the West, and then you'd have to move one team from the West over to the East? That would maybe balance the power, because then in the West you're looking at USC, UCLA, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Iowa are probably the top 5 teams in that side. And then you have Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Michigan State, and I guess either Northwestern or Purdue would be the first 2 choices to kind of move over to the East. Give me your take on this. What does it actually look like when USC and UCLA join the Big Ten in 2024?
Oh, well, they're definitely going to be on the West. And I think this is another concern that the Big Ten always had was you had four perennial contenders. Michigan State's made the playoff twice. Michigan's been once. Ohio State's made it a couple times. Penn State's always had a solid program, and then everybody else they're in the East. You had an Iowa team that usually had 2 or 3 losses or didn't have the offense. You had a Wisconsin team with 2 losses showing up. You had Northwestern. We talked about them a while back making a nice little run, somehow getting there. You didn't have a power team on the other side to really compete in those title games. I mean, you did when you had the legends and leaders because that was sort of just guys everywhere. Putting USC, they want a USC Ohio State Big Ten championship or a Michigan UCLA Big Ten championship. That's the kind of matchup they want to design. If Oregon and Washington do join and they keep adding on, I think you move Purdue over to the east and you move Northwestern maybe to the east, or somehow those 2 are going to be on the move and be on the shift. It's going to kind of screw them over because that's going to make it even tougher for them to play for a title. And that's where I think you might even see pain on these middle of the road teams. It's not the elite schools are going to be there. Now you're going to have to really overachieve. You're going to have to really develop and recruit and win some of these tough games and hope they beat up on each other to actually play for a title now.
It's going to be interesting because you talk about this as, let's say, I don't want to speculate too hard that Oregon and Washington are coming out that way, because anything could happen. They could wind up in the Big 12 for all we know. They could wind up anywhere. They could try to figure out a way to keep the Pac-12 alive. We don't know on that one yet. I'm with you. I think that it makes most sense. Maybe Purdue makes more sense than Northwestern to move over. But you're right. You're looking at, they want to see USC. Listen, I would love to see every single year USC and Wisconsin. I think that'd be a blast of a game, especially seeing the Southern Cal boys trying to come to Wisconsin in late November and dealing with that, or having to go to St. Paul, Minnesota, and playing the Golden Gophers and Fleck up there with snow coming off the lake and it being just awful up there. So it's an interesting scenario here, what this could mean for the Big Ten. I think that it really balances. I think this move is a huge power move. I think now the argument really is we have 2 superpowers and then 3 little powers and then everybody else.
We've gone from a group of 5 to a power 5 to a power 2, or we can call them let's call them a power couple, and then the other 3.
Fresh, what's the next move? So we kind of alluded to that the rumors are out there about Washington and Oregon. I'm sure more information is going to come out about them. But what do we see out of the ACC? What do we see out of does the Pac-12 have even a snowball's chance in hell to stay alive? Like what's the next domino in your eyes to fall after this one?
Well, I think it's Notre Dame. How much longer can they survive as an independent? They have a tie right now with the ACC where they play so many games against conference opponents, and then they obviously have their sport is full on. I don't think Notre Dame fans or the administration want to be another team in the Big Ten because to win the Big Ten, if you're Notre Dame now, you have to go through Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, USC, UCLA, Wisconsin. Like that list now is extremely lethal that they would have to fight through. If they strengthen their bid and could lock in with the ACC fully, there they have teams I think they can compete with and beat. I mean, Miami, Florida State are perennial powers from back in the day. Are they fully returned yet? We were talking NC State in our preview, how they have a chance of really being a good football team. Is Clemson on the downturn? If I'm Notre Dame, I lock myself in there because as an independent, depending on the playoff committee goes, what are you really bringing? What's your NBC contract really bringing to you anymore? If these other schools are getting these power deals through the ACC network, the SEC network, the Big 10 network, or the Pac-12 network, that's where the big money's coming. NBC, who already pays for all these Olympics and they pay for soccer and they pay for other stuff, how can they keep affording to pay Notre Dame if the value is going to go up? They used to have their own network. I think that right there is going to hurt them. Right, the Longhorn network actually hurt Texas, and now they're really going to pair off with the SEC network. You saw that move. After Notre Dame, it's going to come down to the Big 12 and the Pac 12, which one of those conferences still truly exists. We saw the Big 12 make their move in kind of reaction to the Oklahoma Texas deal. Does the Pac 12 take on the bigger schools or they collapse and become a subset? Does Utah, Colorado, Arizona State, Cal, Stanford, like who gets left out in the cold? That's going to be a real big item. They're going to have to really attract some of those fringe teams. But then you start watering down some of the conferences too. You're never going to replace USC and UCLA as an image. But you've got to start scrambling now and getting on the phone and trying to find out how you're going to survive as a legit conference, or you as a perennial power name in the world of college athletics, especially college football, will cease to exist.
Yeah, I wanted to pull real quick and jump onto Notre Dame. Notre Dame's TV deal with NBC expires after 2025. So you could be looking at that. That is NBC. I don't know where their head's at on some things. They could be looking to pull something real quick and go, we'd rather throw our hat in the ring for somebody else. Like, why give Notre Dame just 15 or whatever millions of dollars on this? It might actually be more financially lucrative if Notre Dame were to join the ACC. It depends on who came with them. Do we see like maybe a school like Memphis or Louisville?
I have a fun one for you. West Virginia. The old Big East had Syracuse, Pitt, West Virginia, Notre Dame. How about you get the reconnection of those rivalries? Because everybody loves you. Now, first of all, you get the backyard brawl between Pitt and West Virginia every year. You get West Virginia, Syracuse in basketball and football. You bring back some of that 80s, 90s. You also have, I think the rivalry is what they were when they felt up. No one in West Virginia wanted to go to the Big 12. They went because the Big East basically collapsed. Went from a basketball football league to basketball only. You get them back in there. You keep that. It's not a media market, but it keeps a name and the league that will keep you going along with them.
Yeah, that's interesting to play there. All right, last question for you first. Bigger impact. Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC. SEC was already the best conference, and bringing in Texas and Oklahoma, two blue blood powerhouse programs, most lucrative athletic department in the country with Texas. Does that have a bigger impact than USC and UCLA media market making the Big 10 coast to coast? And you're going to have at least 14 hours of Big 10 football on Saturdays. Which one was the bigger impact?
That's a very, very tough question. I'm going to say the USC UCLA move. Oklahoma, Texas, they were a two-team league anyway, really, the Big 12, and that was kind of, at fringe. With Oregon and Washington, some other schools in the Pac-12, you still had a viable resource out there. Utah was a very viable program. But by the two main schools in the league historically, the Rose Bowl and the Coliseum, you just gutted that entire league. Oregon cannot survive and hold that league together. Washington State cannot hold that league together. Arizona State cannot hold that league together. It's a football-driven discussion. It's not basketball. It's not baseball, and you've gutted it. It's not it's not academic requirements. None of that stuff really matters. It's football, 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 and it's done. This move, you effectively killed another conference, and you've expanded yourself coast to coast.
I was leaning more towards Texas and Oklahoma. just because I think that both of those, the financial piece added already, we've agreed that while we have the two best conferences in the country here, I say that they added enough. Well, yes, I think USC and UCLA add more than Texas and Oklahoma, but I don't think it was enough to completely close that gap. I still think there is a slight gap still between the SEC and the Big 10.
Real quick, of the two teams that split, who wins a conference championship quicker? Texas or Oklahoma, or UCLA or USC? And that pair.
Ooh, I think that I would go with USC and UCLA because if I don't know how the SEC is going to do their conference, how their divisions, and if they're going divisionless, I think it's going to be even harder. If you keep with the East and West, is Saban still coaching at Alabama? Because as long as Saban's coaching at Alabama, it's going to be very, very difficult for them. Is Kirby Smart still at Georgia? Going to be very, very difficult there. It's reversed of the Big Ten, where all the teams are really good in the East, and there's only one or two really tough teams in the West. It's reversed in the SEC. You have all the good teams in the West with the LSU's, Alabama, and A&M. If Oklahoma and Texas has got to go through that group, it's going to be tough. It's going to be real tough. So I would say USC and UCLA, just because I think that it's not an easy road, but it's an easier road to go through Nebraska, Wisconsin, Iowa than it would be to go through the western part of the conference here. All right, Fresh. I will tell you this: we're talking all of this expansion, and I am just double checking to make sure that they are still an accredited university by the AAU, which is, yes, they are. So, Fresh, I love this Twitter question because I've asked this multiple times out there about it. I have the best idea for expansion. I want the Big 10 to be the first international conference. I want them to pick up the University of Toronto. I want them to recruit. They are AAU accredited. The Big 10 likes their history. And who did Michigan play in their second game ever of all time? So the University of Michigan, who's the all-time winningest program in all of college sports, who did they play in the second game they ever played? The University of Toronto, and they tied them. They did not beat the University of Toronto. I'd love to see them get involved.
I would be all for it if they had to play by Canadian football rules across the border. Every time we went up there, the goalpost is in the middle, and they played the field longer. If that's the rules, I'd be all about that.
I love it. All right, folks, you've been listening to another, maybe quick in an emergency, but another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're part of Spinnable Sports, so make sure you're going to spinnablesports.com. Yep, spinnablesports.com. Got an article out there about this merger, kind of recapping some of the stuff that we're saying here on the podcast. Also out there, top 10 football games, plus our preseason rankings are slowly coming out. But make sure you're going to spinnablesports.com. Like, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from, whether you're watching us on the YouTube or you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, any pods, Amazon Pods, Google Pods, whatever pods. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave us that 5-star review because you guys know, Fresh and I, we're 5-star prospects. Make sure you're following us on Twitter. Interact with us. We love interacting with you guys. We've wound up increasing our followers quite a bit as we're rolling along towards football season. I'm looking forward to it this year. Fresh, this is crazy.
All right, let's get it going. Media days are almost here. Before we know it, it's fall camp. Ready for kickoff.
Bye,
Bye.
y'all.